fourth season's concerto arrives with confidence bordering on insolence, birdsong declared rather than suggested, storms choreographed with relish, cold rendered and available in chattering strings. Long detached from their maker, they circulate the climate itself. They are argumentative works, intensely physical, saturated with bodies and gesture. Now, published in 1725 with accompanying sonnets that mapped sounds on the scene, they announce Vivaldi's instinct for spectacle and social address rather than pastoral innocence. From this point of frame, it is necessary to quickly backward to the unstable foundations that produce such assured music. Now, Antonio Lucio Vivaldi was born in March 1678 during an earthquake. Baptized immediately at home in case the ground or the child gave way entirely. Venice specialized in such symbolism. Splendor balanced over instability. Now, his father, Giovanni Battista Vivaldi, was a professional violinist at St. Mark's, a man of practical musicianship rather than metaphysics. From him, Antonio inherited not only technique, but understanding of music as labor. Father and son played together, traveled together, negotiated fees together. The relationship was collaborative rather than sentimental. Music was the family business. Vivaldi's body, however, resisted easy use. He suffered lifelong respiratory problems, stretezza di petto, the tightness of the chest. That curtailed physical exertion and shaped his vocation. He was ordained a priest in 1703. He found in the clergy a social position compatible with fragile health. Almost immediately, he ceased to say Mass, citing medical necessity. This omission would follow him like a shadow. Venice tolerated contradiction, but it also remembered it. The priest who did not officiate became an object of curiosity and then superstition. His vivid red hair earned him the nickname Prieste Rosso. His behavior assured it stuck. That was to say, the Red Priest. We know him today as the Red Priest. If priesthood gave Vivaldi legitimacy, the Ospedale del Piazza gave him power, appointed him violin master the same year as his ordination. He entered one of Europe's most remarkable musical institutions, a charitable home for abandoned girls whose orchestras and choirs were famed across the continent. Piazza's musicians performed hidden behind screens, their sound divorced from visible bodies, a paradox that only intensified fascination. For them, Vivaldi composed restlessly. Concertos stretched technique, tested endurance, and foregrounded individual virtuosity with collective discipline. This was collaboration under constraint, intimacy without invisibility. The relationship was productive and volatile. He argued with administrators, resigned and returned, then negotiated. You always have to negotiate insofar as these things are concerned. Yet Pieta remained his primary laboratory. These young women were not muses in the romantic sense, but professionals and professional partners whose capacities shaped his imagination. He wrote for specific hands, specific lungs, specific temperaments. The erotic charge sometimes attributed less than scandal did in proximity. Music written for bodies, trained to respond precisely and repeatedly under pressure. Desire here is sublimed into sound, rendered acceptable through structure. On the 1710s onward, Vivaldi plunged into the operatic world with entrepreneurial intensity. Venetian opera was commercial, competitive, and cruel. Composers were expected to deliver notoriety at speed, singers to display themselves, and patrons as always, to meddle. Vivaldi thrived and suffered in equal measure. He collaborated with liberalists, star-casti, noble sponsors, adapting his own music shamelessly and tailoring arias to individual throats. Opera sharpened his sense of character and conflict, but it also exposed him to gossip. Though it was through the opera that Anna Giro entered his life. A young concerto of limited range but distinctive presence, Giro became Vivaldi's closest artistic collaborator in his later years. He wrote roles for her perpetually and repeatedly, defended her abilities against critics, and travelled with her and her half-sister, Paulina, who served as chaperone. Their arrangement was unconventional enough to attract sustained comment. Indeed, the priest living and working close proximity to a female singer, promoting her career with unusual loyalty. This was irresistible to Rumour, as it would be even today. If they had social media today, this would blow up all over the place. It was quite chronic. Whether Vivaldi and Giro were lovers is ultimately less important than the suspicion of the fact itself. In 18th century Venice, reputation was currency. Accusations of impropriety, especially sexual impropriety, were effective weapons. Vivaldi's enemies used Giro to question his morality, his priesthood, and his fitness for patronage. He responded with formal indignation, insisting on propriety and supervision. Yet the emotional investment is unmistakable. Giro's voice became central to his operatic language. His fortunes and hers intertwined. This was a partnership of dependence and exposure. Intimacy rendered dangerous by visibility. Life, in the conventional sense, remains thin. Giovanni Battista continued to appear in Vivaldi's dealings until his death in 1736, after which Antonio's position noticeably weakened. Other relatives exist largely as legal or financial footnotes. Vivaldi's true kinship networks were made through his work. Students, performers, and patrons. These relationships were intense but unstable, bound by contract rather than blood. As we see today, things are bound by contract, initially speaking, all the time. Those days were exactly the same. We have to understand that. They offered opportunity and threat in equal measure, exactly the same as today. Society, Vivaldi occupied a precarious middle ground. He moved among nobles and cardinals and travelled to Matura, Rome, Amsterdam, Vienna, yet was never fully secure in any court. He was admired as a virtuoso and distrusted as a personality. His priesthood both elevated and constrained him. His independence irritated institutions and that preferred obedience. This decisive blow came in 1737 when Cardinal Ruffo barred him from producing opera in Ferrara, citing his failure to say Mass and association with Giro. The ban was moral theatre, but its consequences were very real. Vivaldi protested furiously in his letters, defending his health and honour, yet the episode marked his decline, and it was by the late 1730s musical fashion had shifted. A lighter, more symmetrical, gallant style edged out Vivaldi's muscular rhetoric. Commissions dwindled. He sold manuscripts cheaply, travelled restlessly, and finally left Venice for Vienna, perhaps seeking imperial favour. There, in 1741, he died quietly and was buried without ceremony. The Red Priest passed from fashion with remarkable speed. Even today, his operas only remain as relics. What remains is not merely the musical pattern, but the pattern of life lived in exposure, Vivaldi's sexuality survives as a question rather than a confession, significant precisely because it shaped how others constrained him. His collaborators, familial, institutional, artistic, were engines of invention and sources of vulnerability. His social world was one of constant negotiation, where intimacy could be recorded as scandal and devotion as hypocrisy, basically. Returning finally to the Four Seasons, we hear them now, not as natural nature painting, but as social documents written by a man acutely aware of bodies, watched lives, and the costs of vulnerability. Their brilliance lies not in their timelessness, but in friction, the sound of harmonies tested by invention, order sustained by appetite. Vivaldi's weather is never just meteorological, it is the climate of life lived too publicly, too intensely, and too boldly to remain respectable for long. Even today, we actually look back upon Vivaldi's work as quite substantial to our own society. It rests within televisual treats, it rests within social media stigma, it rests within everything we do and say. Vivaldi's The Four Seasons actually culminates in the whole of society, and we rest upon its laurels on a regular basis. This is intrinsic to our enjoyment. I, today, even have Vivaldi's poster over there. I have a poster of The Four Seasons over there. It really rests with me on a regular basis, and I adore it. It's wonderful and resonates within our consciousness on a regular basis. Together with other such respectable and notable musicians, Vivaldi lives long and lives forever.
Music. It's as if the music had already been written.
Especially in The Four Seasons. Give us a good clicking.